our first speaker is Marina Terragni from Italy. She's a journalist and writer. Some of Marina's books are La scomparsa delle donne, which is temporary motherhood, and then Utero in affitto, a mercato dei figli. And this is also about, well, this is about surrogacy. Marina founded RadFem Italia and the online magazine Feminist Post. She's country contact for Italy, WHRC, and she's going to talk about being deplatformed by Rebecca Solnit. I hopefully update us on what's happening in the legislation in Italy, which is, we've just got news this week of what's happened there. And also about the deplatforming case where she was teaching, and she'll explain it to you. So welcome, Marina, and over to you.
I would like to tell you about two cases of no debate and deplatforming in which I has been involved. First one, in September, I had to interview Rebecca Solnit at the Mantova Letteratura Festival, which is a great cultural event in Italy. The meeting had been planned for months, but just 48 hours before our meeting, Solnit let the organizer know, and not me directly, that she would have preferred a monologue, given my transphobic position. I should be noted that my questions, which Solnit had asked in advance, did not have to do with gender, but were almost all oriented on America today, on Afghan crisis, and so on. I suppose that someone of the trans lobby from Italy raised the alarm to Solnit, who chose to do his boring monologue without interruption and questions. A few months earlier, I had another episode of the platforming. I had been entrusted with a teaching of philosophy at the University in Venice. 2 weeks before the start of the course, students wrote a letter in which, in the same way, they called me transphobic, say I was threatening the safe space, that we wanted a trans activist and queer course, and so on. So the head of the master asked me to give up teaching. I firmly refused to do this, and I said they had to fire me. They didn't, the course went very well, but it took a lot of firmness and a lot of courage to resist to these pressures. I want to tell you that, as you know, just last week in Italy, the ZAM bill against homotransphobia was blocked. The real content of the law, disguised as protection for homosexual and transsexual, was the introduction of gender identity into a criminal law, something similar to what is happening in other European countries. In Spain, with the lay trans, in Germany, where a similar law was temporarily stopped, and also in Japan. The difference is that in Italy, the true content of the law was masked and undeclared according to the directives of the famous Denton's paper, because the proponents know very well that if they had proposed free gender self-certification, well, public opinion would certainly have been against it. There are other dangerous contents in that law, such as training in schools, engaging to free speech. It was delegated to the judge to decide if your speech constituted a crime of homotransphobic hate. The law, in the intentions of the proponents, should have been a law against misogyny too, though feminist group or association never asked for it, as if women were a minority to be protected and not the majority of the humanity. The widening of crime of misogyny was a way to silencing criticism of feminism. In the same way, in Spain, the government promised A law abolishing prostitution in these days, it is a trick to weaken criticism of feminism against lay trans. Fortunately, at the moment, the law in Italy has been stopped at the moment. It would be more correct to say that we have stopped the law. It will be because we radical feminists were the first to mobilize those who brought the most critical arguments. The main obstacle for us is just the no debate. We have tried an infinite number of times to communicate and confront those we proposed the law, and we all have always found a wall. They said of us that we are marginal, residual, out of the history. We ask in vain for a dialogue with the women of the left-wing parties who proposed the law. Closed doors too. We have tried to open up spaces in the media and on TV, but only the Catholic press has continually given us space. For the rest, only episodes. We found space mainly on social media. We have even realized a crowdfunding opinion poll. The questions concerned the topic that they want to keep hidden: gender identity, self-ID, and the majority of Italians were against it. In short, we fought fiercely without respite. We asked to speak in this Senate, we did it. Our enemy in Italy was just no debate. They didn't agree to argue with us because they knew we had good arguments, and they didn't. They didn't agree to argue because they knew we aren't fascist and homophobic. Fascist, by definition, is whoever gags you, who prevents free speech. No debate is pre-fascism. Only today, after the law fell, many have found the courage to speak up, admitting that they didn't have the courage to express their doubts because they were afraid of being defined homophobic and transphobic. The truth is that Zan and friends knew us very well, as feminists. Even personally, they knew our stories. They knew that we have always been alongside gay brothers and lesbian sisters, and that many of us are lesbians themselves, that we took part in their struggles, that we have always fought for respect of transsexual people too. Personally, I was almost a child. In the late 70s, early 80s, I was fighting alongside trans people for the law on registry rectification, always present at their conferences, the flash mobs. I ever risked prison for them. I work in a radio station, Radio Popolare di Milano, where the first Italian gay and lesbian broadcast was born. They knew who we are. And our opposition to their law was for them very embarrassing. I close by saying this. It can be very unpleasant to argue with those who insults you, who calls you TERF and fascist, who takes you to the court. It happened to me too, because of my position on surrogacy, who threaten you, isolates you, gags you, make at risk your job. But no debates hurts us much more. We must be certain that we have at our side most of the citizens who believe what we say and trust in female wisdom. But we must find space to say what is necessary to say, to give the correct information, to clear the field from trans activists and queer propaganda that is very strong, especially among young people. And this is a huge problem. Finally, a few weeks ago, I read in The Guardian a new text by Judith Butler titled, "Why is the idea of gender provoking backlash the world over?" A long text in which a gay, Butler defines as fascism and resistance to gender identity politics, but admits the ongoing backlash all over the world. Right in the last few lines, Butler mentioned gender-critical feminism by saying, that is why it makes no sense for gender-critical feminists to ally with reactionary powers in targeting trans, non-binary, and genderqueer people. Let's all get truly critical now, for this is no time for any of the targets of this movement to be turning against one another. The time for anti-fascist solidarity is now. It seemed like a crack in her no debate, an attempt to reopen a dialogue with gender critical feminism that is growing all over the world. In some way, an admission of weakness is the first time I've seen this. I ask you, how should we interpret this signal from the queen of gender identity politics? Should we evaluate it and accept it, or it is just a trap? I believe this could be a topic for a forthcoming meeting. Thank you for your time and for the strength you give us.